spot for it. If we can get it good.
I've been trimming mine kind of close, but I don't know if I've gotten any scratchies on you guys.
No, we're not really using our fingernails in class right now. You know, we're not doing fingertip work.
Yeah.
So
That you're
it
wanting
hasn't
to.
come up, but it seems to me that it's gonna.
Yeah.
Okay, here we are. Good morning. So we will be moving back into some skeletal system stuff today. And hopefully we'll also be able to grab some muscle system things as well. So yesterday we were kind of feeling out like what are your felt senses of the movements of the body. Today, as we kind of land somatically into our bodies and the body as the book, which we are writing in our body worker handbook minds. We want to revisit that, and we'll just kind of do the actions and say the names of the actions so that we're associating that vocabulary on top of your movement. So let's again kind of start out with low down in the feet, just because having that predictability I think really helps. So I'm going to just pop this up so that you can see. You can do this at your own position, whatever angle works well. So in the muscles themselves, we have contraction. Muscles that are folding our joints one way are going to be called flexion, and the other way will be extension. So I'm going to actually flex my feet both ways, which is a confusing way to start it off. But when I'm flexing the dorsal plane of my foot, so just like your back, the foot has a dorsal plane, right? So I'm going to flex that way. And then that pointing motion, we're hitting the plantar plane of the foot. And so that's going to be a plantar flexion, dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, two flexions there. On the knee, I'm going to pull some flexion and extension from that joint. Flexion and extension there. So try that out and get that feel in your body. Yeah.
It's interesting that that's called dorsal. I think that would be called dorsal.
Yeah, you're planting your foot onto the earth, so that will be the plantar surface of the foot. And then like the back of a dolphin, the back of your foot is the top edge, right? Yeah. At the ankle, we have rotation as well. The knee, you might get a little rotation. You can get some rotation there, gently. Hip will also have rotation. I just always cheat with a balance because when I knock things over in here, it's problematic. Okay. Yeah, we've got that adduction of the leg, abduction of the leg, back in, adduction. Oh. The abduction and then the adduction. Yep. Okay. Let's go into the elbows. Just kind of bouncing around. So when we rotate the elbow and shoulder in this way, this medial rotation, lateral rotation, yeah? At the foot, we've got that. We started talking about yesterday, the inversion and the eversion. We'll circle back through this, but just for moving it into the body a little bit. We've got the movement through the shoulders of circumduction, that bigger rotation. And we can also get circumduction at the hips. So you might try that. The hip being specifically where that femur, the big thigh bone, is coming into the pelvis. You can circumduct that as well. Jump into the jaw. We've got elevation, lifting the jaw up, and depression, pushing it down. So we've got a different set of muscles that can pull from below for depression. So just feeling that activation. Mine tends to like have a funny little jag to it. I'm always trying to like retrain that symmetry into the body. At the jaw, we also have protraction and retraction. So you can take the jaw itself and protract it, push it forward, and retract it like that. And deviation, lateral deviation. Yeah. Okay. A special move that we can get really just in the thumbs is opposition, where we can press straight into. Happens only at this joint of the thumb when the thumb pad crosses the palm to the last pinky finger. So even on this one, you don't have to do it. There's a different muscle that's clicking in. Can you feel that? All right. You might be able to engage it a little bit on the ring finger, but it's that across the palm action that's going to count as the opposition. Yeah. Okay. So on the neck, we could get some flexion, some extension. The neck's going to give us so many options. We've got like all the options in the neck. Flexion, extension. We've got rotation. So we can rotate to the left. We can rotate to the right, and we can do the lateral flexion. So we've got forward flexion is going to be kind of our standard expectation, but if we're dropping the ear to the shoulder, it's going to be lateral flexion. So feel through that. Give yourself some flexion, extension, rotation, lateral flexion, lateral flexion. There's so many muscles operating in the neck. Tuning into those muscles will really enhance your attunement with the client's bodies. You will almost never meet a client that doesn't need a little neck work. So it's a good one.
Rotation for this movement too?
Yeah, that movement would be more the circumduction. But on the neck, technically, you're kind of doing small portions of. There's a lateral flexion built into it. There's an extension built into it. And since it's a stack of the spine, you really have a lot of small grades of motion, whereas like with the shoulder, that circumduction is really those two bones, or through that joint, is really just doing the whole movement. Okay. How do you feel?
Good.
A little warmed up? All right. Go ahead and get a comfortable position. Okay. And we want to start feeling into the way that the muscles act more and more. So let's start off with finding that comfortable position. Tuning into the breath. I always find myself ready to ease up and over any like little collapses in my posture. And pull that sweeping awareness from the feet up through the ankles, through the knees, the hips, through the low back, upper back, neck, head, face. Already you're starting to have smoother movement of this awareness after a few times practicing. So keep that coming up from the feet to the knees, the hips, the abdomen, the chest, through the back of the neck, over the top of the head, rolling down the face, the shoulders, wrists, hands. One more breath all the way sweeping through. And I want you to go in your awareness of your feet and just tighten up your feet. Ball up your toes. Flex and contract those muscles. Try to gradually activate every muscle of the foot in some way if you can. Tighten it up and hold it through a few breaths. And then on the next breath, release that contraction slowly and attentively. Easing back out into the full space of your foot. Okay. And then into the lower leg. Adjust your position a little bit so that you can tune to this and just gradually, steadily find ways to engage every muscle through the calves and the shins to the extent that you can with awareness. Noticing any unevenness, any asymmetry. Build that tension up and hold it. And with the next breath out, go ahead and soften slowly and smoothly as you can. Okay. Moving into the thighs and hips. Find ways to activate those muscles, tighten them up. I'm lifting my feet a little bit off of their rest to make sure to give that resistance into the thighs. Find ways to build that control and tension through the backs, the tops of the thighs, the sides, and the medial edge of the thighs. See how evenly and smoothly you can contract that and hold it. And smoothly, slowly release that back out, feeling the change as you let it spill back into relaxation. We're going to go into the low trunk, the belly, the low back, throughout the pelvic bowl, anything that you can find to engage. See what you can do to tighten it up. Front and back, side and side, lifting and stabilizing. And on that next breath, so slowly release that out. And into the upper chest, upper back. Most of us have constrictions here anyway. Usually we're trying to loosen them up, but go ahead and compound them now. Lock it all down. Arms tight into the sides. Nice long breath. And releasing that out so smoothly and slowly. Not into the face and neck. Harden that up. Take your time finding all those little spots that you could pull a little more, push a little more. And deep breath. And release that. Ooh. And through the arms. And here in the arms, see what you can do to hold this contraction steady while letting everything else that you've already softened stay soft. And slowly release that out. And then just the hands. Just ball up the hands nice and tight. Squeeze them down. And soften. And release. Okay. So, how's everyone feel? Anything happen in the body that was surprising to you with that check?
I'm getting more awareness of my trigger points in my wrists. You notice that one side of my body is higher than the other.
Uh-huh.
It's because I shake on this side. No reason to do it over here. It feels really weird.
Okay. So you have like a repetitive movement
Yeah.
that's kind of compounding
yes.
there. You can highlight. Yes. Yes. And I love that you're already pulling out that like tiny slice of a story, a repeating story, a frequently repeating story, but it's a little tiny snapshot of your life, right? And catching that snapshot in yourself is going to start expanding more and more into catching those snapshots in other people where you're like feeling contraction patterns. You're like, ooh, what daily life activity is happening over and over again that's uneven, that's asymmetrical? Right, right, that you're like catching stuff and start to be able to kind of clinically problem solve and to construct, well, if all of these muscles are tense in this way, then here's the motion that I'm expecting they must be doing. Like, what is this motion? Like, are they like pulling lines on a sailboat or something? And then you'll like, every once in a while you'll say it and they'll be like, how did you know?
Awesome.
It's actually like a really great parlor trick. The more comfortable you are doing that, it's, you know, you're obviously not actually cheating. Like, you have a real way of knowing, and that helps your clients give you the trust that will help you get deeper access into their body. Right? Like, what is going on in your life?
That's really cool. Because it's going to be you can categorize different actions, I bet, like.
Yeah,
drawing
absolutely.
Or doing this a lot could be a bunch of different occupations.
Right, and you start kind of narrowing it down. A lot of times it'll be something simple, like the way that people drive, that you'll have somebody that you're like getting into their hips, and you're like, whoa, do you like really just rotate your leg out to the side, like your left leg is just out there while you're driving? Because this is like, just feels like you're doing this all the time, you know?
At the same time, though, you don't want to lead the witness.
No, yeah, exactly.
Put a thought in their head.
Sometimes I'll just show, like, is there something that's happening in your life that's like this,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And let them develop
Oh my god.
an
this
idea.
Point right here is just like
Feeling
doing that
it.
made me realize my arms need me to go do something with them and not anything else.
Nice. Yep, working that through. All right, so let's talk about bone. What it's made out of a little bit, and some of it's like related tissues. So you guys, I'm sure, have some prior exposure to the idea of bones. What do you already know?
Calcium.
Mm-hmm.
They're hard.
Hard,
They start
calcium.
off kind of soft when you're a baby.
That's right.
And they harden up.
Osteum.
Bones. I mean, birds. Birds have bones. I'm so tired. I'm sorry.
It was so, I feel really tired today too. It was so windy last night, and I was like, over and over again. Okay, birds. Yeah, let's put it. Birds have bones. Theirs are a little different than ours.
Hollow.
Bird bones, yeah, have that
Are our
like
bones
hollow.
hollow too?
Not
Well, we have
exactly.
marrow.
Yeah,
Marrow inside there.
good call. Marrow.
And there's blood in the marrow, right?
Yes. Yes. This is actually where we are constructing a lot of our bone cells. Marrow tissue is the base cell that a lot of important blood cells are dividing off of. So that's really key. Not every bone has marrow, but I will kind of pull up this little image. We've got these guys. So it's showing we've got like the structure of the shape of the bone, and you can see there's like the hard tissue gets a little less dense, a little more spongy in certain portions of the bone, and then in other portions of the bone, long bones especially, will have those like marrow cavities that are really more locations of blood construction,
What's the purpose
which
of
is
sponginess?
hemopoiesis, blood construction. Hemo is blood, and poiesis is like poetry, making, combining. Yeah, so the spongy bone is really where the red bone marrow especially is being produced. And if you look in close, there's also this real interesting little, the epiphyseal line. So it's showing here. I kind of covered it, so I'll uncover it. But I'm pointing to it. And that is actually where the bones lengthen in children as they're growing. The bone isn't like uniformly growing at all points. There's sort of a plate of really highly active growth cells for those bones that are together, and so it's like lengthening out both ways from those locations. It's pretty cool. As something to know about bones that's actually not in the textbook, but I think it's pretty important to know that bones are always constructing and deconstructing. So you have specialized little cells that are wandering around. They're almost kind of like spiders, actually, or like starfish, you can kind of picture these little starfish guys. And so they're actually listening into the bloodstream and getting chemical messages about how much calcium is available in the blood. They're trying to regulate that. Calcium is an electrolyte, right? And so it's part of how we're controlling the salination and the electrical conductivity of all of the fluids of the body. And so the bones are storing calcium, of course, partly because the structure of calcium is very stable for us and we need strong bones, but also because we need to be able to constantly throw a little more calcium into the blood. We also need to be able to lock calcium down to have fairly fine control of that, like electrolyte hydration balance. Okay. So we've got osteoblasts, our little cell guys that basically can lay the brick of the bone. So they're going around grabbing a little bit of calcium as instructed out of the blood and constructing that into the bone. And then
So the bones are kind of like an organ too.
they absolutely are. They're very alive. They're very actively shifting and evolving. So then our counterpart there would be the osteoclasts. So they're like the cataclysm of the bone. They're actually ripping calcium off of the bone structure and tossing it back into the blood. Okay. So they're like little explosions coming from these little starfish guys. And these are mobile cells. They're not really going to leave bones, but they are going to kind of sweep over the surface of bones to a certain extent. They're not like locked into the structure of the bone. You do.
Can they travel
Go ahead.
elsewhere?
That would be weird.
Weird.
Yeah, not that they can't, because you do get like weird little calcifications. Like, have you guys ever had like melia, usually in the facial skin, where there's just like a little ball of calcium? So it's almost like a zit, but it's just like a rock actually. It's super common in babies.
On my wrist. That, I think that's something like that.
Perhaps. And there are a handful of diseases where like that calcification process gets disrupted and can either, osteoporosis, you're having a lot of tossing that calcium back out and not laying it fast enough. And there are diseases that work completely the opposite, where you're calcifying regions of the body that are not supposed to become bone.
It's out of whack.
It can. So there's many delicate pieces going on in the balance of the bone structure here. And so they're alive and they're reforming, and these guys are not like arbitrarily grabbing and tagging calcium all the time. They're gonna do it in places that are kind of convenient for them. And so in places where the bone is under pressure and bone cells are getting frequently pulled on, they're gonna actually have a lot of capacity to build up bone to relieve that pressure, and that's where you're going to get bone spurs, where you have usually this is a complete anatomical made-up situation here of this particular shape, but if you have a ligament coming off of some location on the bone, and for whatever reason this muscle is like hypercontracted all the time, so this ligament is getting yanked on all the time, then you can get like a spindulation of ossification coming off of the bone, and that is actually quite common. You'll also have, like, they'll tell you, like jump roping or like kind of gentle rhythmic impact on the whole skeleton is really healthy for the skeleton. It's actually actively telling all the osteoblasts to keep locking in a little bit of calcium, and you will literally thicken your bone tissue by that like vibrational impact repeating through the body. Walking builds up bone. People who stop walking in older years and like just have a sedentary lifestyle window will lose bone tissue so rapidly compared to people who continue to walk even like a mile a day. So This is all highly adaptable, really important.
If really quick, if that was
Mhm.
a hypercontracted muscle, would that be a tendon? You said ligament.
Yes, I did say, yes, you're right. So a ligament, and we'll get deeper into that. A ligament would be attaching from a bone to a bone, and a tendon would be attaching from a bone to a muscle.
And so the thing you described was that the bone could, through the tendon, build more of that calcium response.
Right, that as the tendon is pulling on it and creating stress and a stress point, then there's going to be more osteoblast activity around that stress point. So in the short term, that's just going to alleviate the stress, but you compound that for 20 years, and now you can have like some kind of odd formations going on in the surface of the bones. Mm-hmm. And maybe you guys have heard this before, but I think it's like such a great example of like how active the skeletal system's formation and reformation capacity is when they go in on archaeological digs and they're pulling up skeletons from the like whatever culture they happen to be in. They are usually really using the adaptive structure of the bone to identify like what was the occupation of this person, what was, you know, you can get a lot about their age and their the kinds of pressure that have been put on their body, their sex, of course, the differentiation of the pelvis especially, you'll be able to get that from. But one of the super classical examples is like medieval Europe, medieval Asia, places where you have these like bow hunting cultures, where you have a really strong bilateral bifurcation where you have like asymmetry permanently installing in the behavior pattern, where a lot of pressure is running all the way up one arm and shoulder, and a different, like completely different angle of pressure is running up the other arm, right? That like many archaeologists can just like identify an archer on site in a tomb. Just like, yeah, they're just, the overall development of the skeleton is so visibly warped, you would be able to see it. Like, you might not know that's an archer. We'd need it pointed out to us perhaps, but the sense of like, wow, that set of arm bones is like they're not the same left to right, right?
And
yeah,
he was buried with a bow and
symmetry.
arrow
That
right
house,
next to him.
that house, the golden arrowheads embedded in the tomb.
I wonder who. What
Right.
his occupation.
So yeah, we love bones. Bones are full of beautiful mysteries. Along with bones in the skeletal system, we have a few other important kinds of tissue. We have cartilage. Okay, and there's going to be two kinds of cartilage. Hyaline, which means glassy. So this is the cartilage that is kind of functionally replacing bones. It's allowing us to hold a structure. So in the nose, in the ears, that's where you're going to have like really easy access hyaline cartilage. You're also going to have white fibrocartilage. And that's going to be more involved in those joint systems. So every place, a joint technically is where two or more bones are intersecting. What they do there is called articulation. So the location is a joint. The action is articulation. And you can say that one bone is articulating to another bone or is articulating with another bone. So that would be kind of the phrasing. So you might have the femur articulating with the pelvis or articulating to the pelvis. Would sound right. So that white fibrocartilage is going to be part of the joint capsule. rather than acting like a bone independently, like a bit of hyaline cartilage. The white fibrocartilage is going to be more actively supporting the function of other nearby bones and the way that they're intersecting there. Also at a joint, many of the joints of the body, you're going to see this cartilage, you're going to see ligaments. That should be a different color, huh? So you've got bones, you've got the ligaments drawing across that are kind of constricting the action of that joint articulation so that it can't go beyond the shape that that limb should be able to make and support, right? And so it'll be attached into each other. And then you'll also have frequently a bursa. And so that's like a packet, like a cushiony, liquid-filled packet that allows the synovial fluid to be contained and to kind of soften the impact of those two joints against each other as they are moving about.
Can you have like a ruptured bursa?
You can. It's terrible. It's not a good thing at all.
Fluid is spelled what?
Synovial. Synovial.
That's different
Is
from.
that an interstitial fluid?
It is not exactly. It is constricted in the joint itself once it is synovial fluid. So it's not too dissimilar from interstitial fluid, and it's kind of acting like interstitial fluid in the location that it's working, but it's not quite free flowing because the joint packet there is keeping it contained.
It's contained within the bursa?
It is
sac?
within the bursa sac and the synovial membrane lining. So this part we would kind of be calling that synovial membrane. So you've got like a wrapping that keeps it all tightened down together. If you happen to be cooking a chicken or have a big piece of pork or something where you have some of these like bones, just like have a little mental note to appreciate as you're dealing with the joints inside of any animals that you're eating, like to notice the construction there, because even with like birds, like we're pretty similar in some important ways. So you may be able to pick out those locations. So the joints themselves, I do want to come back to the bone system altogether, but really quickly let's go over what joints we have in the body. Not yet naming them name by name, but noticing we have a couple specific kinds of joints. So the ones that we've already been discussing are our synovial joints. So these are defined by that synovial membrane. Some ligamentation of some kind, at least a ligament, a bursa or more. The plural of bursa is going to be bursae. Okay. And then we're going to have another type of joint, which would be the synarthrotic joints. These are not going to be as significant in your early clinical problem solving knowledge that you have to acquire the synarthrotic, but these are basically places where it could also be described as like an incomplete fissure. So in the skull, where you have the plates of the skull, and there is fissuring, but the plates maintain a certain amount of gentle flexibility relative to each other. They don't ever want to articulate as such away from each other, but they do have like a real subtle kind of tectonic movement.
Is that called gliding, like in the hands?
They can be gliding, yes.
Okay.
Hmm.
But much like less.
It's very, yeah, it's very, very subtle. This book is like, it's really not making us go down into that too hard, so that's kind of nice, because it's a lot of vocabulary that I think you're okay not acquiring. So we're always saving those. What can we get away with? So we're gonna really just let ourselves focus on those synovial or diarthrotic joints, or which are freely movable. So we're going to talk a little bit about the potential actions of those diarthrotic joints. And if you have your trail guide with you, the pictures in the trail guide I really think are our best images that we have on hand with us. I didn't have this marked. Did somebody find that faster than me? Oh, I got it. It's 34. Okay.
Arthro means joint.
Yes, sorry, left that out. Arthro means joint. Okay. So we've got a few significant types of joints. On the Mosby's 152, we have a little bit more bone-like but simplified version of these joints. In the trail guide, we have like kind of a hyper-simplified conceptual version of these joints. So let's just kind of go through them and think through how we would expect joints of these shapes to be able to articulate. Okay, so a ball and socket joint, we have ball and socket joints at the shoulder and at the hip. So what do those areas have in common?
They can both circumflex.
Yeah, exactly. So that ball and socket gives us a special stability for circumduction, for having a location where that movement can really stay smooth. Okay.
And this is a diarthrotic kind
Yes.
of joint?
Diarthrotic or free moving or synovial joints. I know they really get us with these little vocabulary sets where we have to have 3 different terms for one thing. Why do they do this to us?
Cultures. Cultures combining.
Then we've got, let's go next to the hinge joint. This is a nice one that's kind of a simple, easy one to grasp. We really only have it in a couple places in the body. The true hinge joint is going to be in the elbow, actually. So you can get that feeling of like this is definitely not a ball and socket joint. If you do something that looks like circumduction, you're actually getting a lot of action in the shoulder to accomplish that. If you can isolate the shoulder and really just hold the shoulder, lock the shoulder still, you'll find that the range of what the elbow can do is actually quite linear by itself.
Is
Just
the
a-
knee a hinge joint?
The knee, yes, also would be a hinge joint.
Is it a synovial joint?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all of these like mobile joints where we're getting something out of the articulation of the joint, we can control it, are going to be synovial or diarthrotic.
Could you call that, could you make that synonymous with voluntary? Because I know that voluntary muscles are a thing. Is it the same?
You would most of the time not be wrong in saying voluntary, but because we're not actually giving neurological instruction.
On the same trip.
So voluntary versus involuntary is a neurological distinction, right? And we're not telling the bones to move relative to one another, we're telling the muscles to pull the bones. And so, like, it's not wrong to say that the joint actions are voluntary, but you wouldn't exactly say that the joints are making voluntary
Choices.
actions, right?
They have less of a brain.
Yeah,
muscle.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Because the movement starts with the muscle and the joint
Right.
responds.
Right. But yes, the joint actions that are very involuntary for us, such as the cranial plates, like we would really have to, I don't know, spend years in a monastery doing meditations focused on that control to have like a lot of actual awareness and subtle control to move any of those synarthrotic joints in a deliberate way. That would be a special skill, one might say a superpower.
The Buddha statues on plates.
Yeah. Let's jump to the saddle joint. This is another one that's like pretty distinct. You're really just going to see that in the thumb specifically. And so take a look at that shape where the structure of it like gives the ability to kind of rock back and forth in one plane, but stops it from gliding the other way. Does that make sense? Like just kind of let your eyes settle on that joint and feel through your thumb to get that sense of why it's like that. And so most of the joints through the thumb, of course, are still kind of hinge joints for the rest of the phalanges up, but it's really this coming off of the hand that you're going to get that action of the thumb and be able to isolate it. Okay.
Are there any other saddle joints?
In the human body, really just the thumb is a true saddle joint. I feel like there was some debate not too long ago about whether like maybe part of the articulation of something happening in the elbow almost counted, but like they must have been bored. So we'll go to the ellipsoid or condyloid joints. You'll notice that, the terms across these two books, I didn't ever realize how much they differ. Which, don't let that freak you out. Let that actually be a bit reassuring. Like it may be a hassle for the exam, but it means that like our language is still evolving in terms of all of our anatomical awareness, and debate is still very active about what counts and what doesn't count under these different headings. Lots of this is being like reworked and evolved all the time. Okay, so I think I misspoke before, but erase that last little bit. We'll go to the ellipsoid joints. This is, they're giving us the example of the wrist, the ellipsoid joint, where there's places where the bones are just kind of sliding over each other. So there's not something dropping into a socket and having that constriction, but there's just more like flat pieces that have some ability to articulate around each other and kind of take those edges. So that's the ellipsoid joint I'm looking at in the trail guide. And it gives us the radiocarpal joint as the example there, where the wrist action is kind of rolling over to more flat places in a few different places. So the equivalent terms on the condyloid joint, also called a pivot joint. So I'm seeing that in two different places. Condyloid or pivot joint. So both of these are giving us the example of that atlantoaxial joint, which is that C1, C2. So one is taking the pressure of the skull, and the other one is actually kind of protruding up through it, giving that axis that it's rotating on. Yeah.
Ellipsoid, I thought you told me that the condyloid is also known as the ellipsoid.
Exactly, that's the part I tried to take back. Sorry.
Oh, okay,
Yep, erase that. Yep, I'm sorry.
making arrows
I was
down here to-
like looking across the two pages, being like, wait, these are not lining up as clearly as I felt like they did before.
Okay, so now I
But you were right. Yep. Mhm.
It's pivot.
Yeah, condyloid or pivot being the equivalent. Yeah, so the ellipsoid in the wrist, the condyloid in the upper vertebrae. Okay. Then we've got gliding joints that are just flat articular processes. So we're going to see this most of the time between those vertebrae. We had those little vertebrae out the other day where there's just kind of those flat surfaces and they're all in a stack. They're going to have like a lot of assistive structure around them to kind of cushion the way that they interact, but the bones themselves are basically flat on flat there. And it's also in the Mosbys, we're getting the pivot joint is we've got an axis of rotation in the radius against the ulna. So the ulna is going to be the bone coming up from the little finger, and the radius is coming up from the thumb. And these guys have a special relationship to each other for this action of rotation. So that's going to count as some pivot joint movement right there.
What's the jaw joint? Can I try to guess what it's called?
Let's see.
Mastoid. Is
Yeah.
that mastoid something? I don't know.
Well, it's the temporomandibular joint.
That's where you get that TMJ.
Yeah, technically everyone has TMJ because that just is the
the name of the
temporomandibular joint. Exactly. And so if you're going to say it as a dysfunction, it would be like with a dash D, TMJD. So people are running around being like, I have TMJ.
Is that,
Of course, that's technically true.
are those abbreviations the same you said yesterday about diagnostic codes for
Mhm.
doctors, which I wasn't familiar with?
Okay. Yeah, the abbreviations are just abbreviations. Like there's a lot of like medical terminology. Diagnostic codes is there's like some huge manual that has a list of everything that the conventional medical system acknowledges can be wrong with a person, and then a number for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
A number.
Yeah, sometimes
For the
with like a
insurance
couple letters
company's
combined
purposes.
with
Okay.
a number, but yeah.
So if they send that over, would we just like look it
You
up?
do not have to read diagnostic codes.
Okay.
Yeah. You won't really get a sheet of paper that just has a diagnostic code. There will be some kind of like glenohumeral strain, like there will be an annotation on it by the time that you see it.
Okay.
And it's going to be a lot more important what the client says to you about what they told the doctor than what the doctor happened to put the code on it for, because the code exactly is for like organizing the insurance process. And especially if you're not really involved in the insurance process, that's hardly going to matter to you. But even if you are taking insurance, then like you're still responding episodically with your client based on like how they're feeling that day and supporting their whole system in recuperation process, you know? So it'll evolve a lot. So you're not exactly having that, like, all your actions dictated to you by the insurance codes.
Has it happened though that like there's a red flag because you see something and you're like, oh, they definitely shouldn't be here, because you can tell from a diagnostic that you're like, uh-oh.
That's a good question.
That's how I got on this thread.
Is there a red flag where you think that somebody shouldn't be in massage? Okay, so let me ask you, what situation should somebody not get a massage?
No bones. Just absolutely no bones.
Sunburn.
Okay.
Bad burn. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Rheumatism.
contraindications, right? Stuff going on with skin, infectious issues, contagious issues. Are those things going to conflict with their diagnostic codes? Not really. They might be an additional diagnostic code that somebody else might give them. But like you're not a diagnostician. You never have to adjust a diagnostic code, and it's not your responsibility to verify whether that diagnostic code is accurate. So if you have somebody in front of you that you're like, this person is completely trying to cheat the system, and this diagnostic code, like they just must have straight lied to the doctor in order to get it, you're still not responsible for that. The doctor handed that diagnostic code down.
Cool.
Yeah.
So it's more,
Yeah.
contraindications are more responding to what you're seeing in the moment and making a judgment call.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rather than getting paranoid over reading something sent
Right.
over from a doctor.
Right.
That's great.
Yeah.
That makes me
I like, not that there's never been anybody who like got kind of gobbled up in like fraud, basically, you know, like there have been doctors that were committing fraud, there have been patients that were committing insurance fraud, there have been massage therapists and acupuncturists, like everybody has tried some weird stuff somewhere, right? But like I suspect that you will never really encounter a true moral collision over insurance fraud. That even if you're kind of like, I don't know if this person really needs to keep having massage, like the massage is not going to hurt them, and they're paying a lot of money for insurance. Like there's no point at which it's your responsibility to be like, you don't need a massage anymore. If the doctor keeps writing the prescription, the doctor wrote the prescription. Yeah.
That's the same part of my brain that's just like, someone comes in and like, allergy. What allergies do you have? Like comes into the restaurant or
Yeah,
whatever.
carefulness, attentiveness. All right. So we kind of whipped through
Oh, but I'd asked
joints
something
there.
before that.
Oh yes.
I
Get
forgot
me
what it
back on that question.
I've totally forgotten.
What were we at?
We're talking about joints, right?
Mhm.
Let me see. Oh, maybe it'll come back to me.
Okay. Well, before we break, let me give you a quick, totally unstudied pop quiz. Woo! All right. So you can leave your books how they are if you want, but let's see. Who can show me a humerus? Just get a hand to a humerus. All right. Eva's got it. Who can show me a femur? All right, yep, exactly. Nice, sturdy, right where we need it. How about a scapula?
Scapula, that's back there. Here's boys.
That's right. Yeah. Cranium. Nice. Clavicle. Nice. Tibia.
Tibias, that's
Yeah.
the down there.
I don't know which side it's on.
Nice.
It's this
Okay.
one.
Yes, it is the front lying, the one that you would smack yourself on a.
The shin bone.
Yep, exactly. Shin bone. Let's get ulna.
That's your other part of your arm.
Oh, Eva, you're so proactive. Yeah, and so that you'll keep track of the ulna is off the pinky, so it's on that.
Ulna's off the pinky.
Yeah, it's on your karate side of your forearm.
Karate chop bone.
Yeah, and how about clavicle? We did that. We did that. I'm gonna get you. Patella.
Patella. Oh yeah, that's your
Mm-hmm.
knee bone.
Patella. How about a phalange?
And they have
That's
the
your
toes.
Oh, the
Yes,
toes.
all of them.
Because
Yeah,
their toes
all
are all
kind of
phalanges.
phalanges. Yep, exactly. How about mandible? Yep. Metatarsal.
That's definitely toes, right?
It's in the foot. You're going the right direction.
Here.
Exactly. They're not all the way up in
Oh,
the foot.
These guys
They're
are
the kind of longer bones inside of the foot, but not out to the toe.
not pointing, not these piggies,
Yeah.
not your piggies, but your.
Yep. Not the piggies. Exactly. How about a sternum?
Sternum, yeah, that's the one that goes right down the middle of your chest.
Mm-hmm. It's actually a little higher than most of us tend to think. That's really attaching up in there. Yep. Yeah, that by here, it's kind of pretty much totally petered out, and then it's just dividing into ribs there. Pelvis, that's a little silly. You guys have that. It's easy. Nice. I like the movement there. Yes. Good. Very good. How about a cervical vertebrae?
Oh, that's way up here.
Way up here. Yep. Yep. Neck only. This, you can usually pretty easily find that T1 vertebrae. That's the top of the thoracic vertebrae. T1, T2. So C is just above there into the base of the skull. Yep. All right. Radius.
That's this one. Oh, no, this one.
That's the
Yeah.
thumb side?
Thumb side. Yep. And carpals. Where we have some
That would be up
carpals.
here in the.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Right where we don't want carpal tunnel syndrome. Mm-hmm. And then metacarpals,
That would be the.
further
front
out,
side, right?
further out into the hand.
Into the hand.
So the
Okay.
carpals are the little square guys, and then the longer ones lifting towards the fingers but still inside the hand, metacarpals. So then where would we find tarsals?
In foot?
That's right. Yep. Closer in towards the ankle before those longer bones that spread out
Finger.
towards the toes. Exactly. And exactly, we've got calcaneus right up underneath. So tucked in with those tarsals, we've got the heel bone itself. All right. Anybody have a idea of the hyoid?
Hyoid is. Oh, it's here. It's floating, right?
It's floating. It's kind of up into the throat. Yeah. That's going to be visible as the Adam's apple on male bodies.
Oh. It's a bone.
And it's a great question. It's an attachment point. So you have several different muscles that need to kind of web across, but if they just hit each other and they're just all soft in there, then you're going to lose a lot of the control and mobility for the neck and lower face
That kind of thing
muscles.
just makes it feel like we're all just pieced together.
Just stitched.
You get
All right, go
how
ahead
is
and
it spelled out?
hyoid, H-Y-O-I-D, hyoid. Okay, so we've got that warmed up. Go ahead and take a little break. Hit those bodily needs. Get yourselves fresh and focused. And I'll see you in 5, let's call it 7 minutes. I made you wait a little extra.
What was my question?
Do you have a little bit of alcohol? I accidentally touched the table with my pen.
Alcohol, I do not know. And then there's the,
And do you have any hard tequila?
this is, right. Do you have any? It doesn't look like it cares that much about the hypochlorous acid. It does want alcohol, I think you're right.
Maybe this hand sanitizer, it's
I bet you're
contains
right.
75%.
Nice. And try so quickly.
There.
I just sprayed it. Nice. Cool. Ba-dum, ba-dum.